capacity, and it has control over territory. All of these the Tamil Tigers have. Therefore, the Tamil Tigers are an armed group. They are a military operation. They wear separate uniforms, identifiable uniform. They have an organized command and organizational capacity, and it has control. The Tigers have had control over the north and the east in a large in the northern area called the Vanni. Four large provinces in the Vanni have been for the last decade under Tamil Tiger control. I would therefore put it to you that the Tamil Tigers are an armed group. Whether or not they have committed acts of terrorism is a separate story, but basically they are an armed group. Government's claim of terrorism is unacceptable. Any government's condemnation of terror is credible only if it is responsive to the reasonable, closely argued, persistent and non-violent dissent. No Sri Lankan government since independence in 1948 has been responsive to the reasonable demands, and in my opinion, the very reasonable demands of the Tamil people, and I remind you that I am a Sinhalese. The Sri Lankan government's response to the armed struggle was to claim, as I said, that the Tamil uprising is nothing but terrorism. This got a marked boost post 9/11 and the so-called war on terrorism. The second strategy has been a massive expansion of the military. Firstly, to crush the Tamil uprising, and more importantly and less recognized, to crush the Tamil people into submission, to accept Sri Lanka as a singular Buddhist nation. And of this, I will produce evidence later in the presentation. Must turn to the politically active Buddhist monks who have been a major problem in Sri Lanka. I emphasize that not all Buddhist monks are politically active, but an awful lot are. They see any concessions, however minimal, to the Tamils by way of power sharing by every Sri Lankan government since 1956 and 57. That is Mr. Bandaranaike's Sinhala-only Act. And any concessions to the Tamils are portrayed to the Sinhala people as a sellout of a Sinhala Buddhist nation to the Tamils. Today's greatest advocates of a return to power, to war, are sections of the Buddhist clergy who wield enormous power in Sri Lanka. Here are some of them in action in 2006. Here are hundreds sitting down in protest against the peace process and demanding a return to war. Here they are, burning the Norwegian flag. You may know Norway is one of the few countries helping in the Sri Lankan peace process. The monks want Norway out. I would put it to them and to others who are supporters of Buddhism that this is not Buddhism but bigotry. Which Buddhist stanza preached what you have seen in previous slides and in this. For the record, my mother was an ardent Buddhist. Here they are, Buddhist monks protesting and breaking up a peace rally of Sinhala peace activists in 26th of August 2006. Many Sinhalese peace activists, many of them Buddhists, organized a rally saying that a return to war was not an option. This was not acceptable to the Buddhist monks who invaded the rally and broke it up. Here you can see them, robes all over the place, trying to break up the rally. Here they are, some 50 monks in February 2007, sit-down protest demanding that the 5-year ceasefire agreement be torn up and a return to war. What is the cost? The cost has been enormous. Tamil civilian lives and property in the north and the east have been extensively damaged. 65,000 were dead up, and now more than 70,000, mainly Tamil civilians. Sinhalese lives have been shed, especially the rural poor, who are the main recruits for the army. There has been massive government military spending, which I will detail for you later. There has been a soaring cost of living and grinding poverty across the country, an increasing foreign debt, and an economic bankruptcy, and the possibility of a failed state, certainly a failing state. It would have been a failed state had it not been propped up by the World Bank, International Monetary Fund, and several foreign countries. There are international concerns about this conflict in Sri Lanka. I would point out that major human rights violations are no longer an internal affair of the country. Sri Lanka claims that the conflict is an internal affair of Sri Lanka and therefore beyond comment of the international community. That's nonsense. We got involved in apartheid South Africa. Apartheid was the internal affair of South Africa because major human rights violations are no longer acceptable and an internal affair of that country. We got involved in East Timor. for the same reason. East Timor brutalized by the Portuguese and later by the Indonesians. Secondly, these conflicts are creating major refugee problems in other countries, as people brutalized by these regimes jump into leaking boats and sink off the Australian coast or get locked up here, rather than get into inhuman methods of dealing with refugees. I think it is time the international community addressed the cause of the problem, which is the problem in Sri Lanka. Thirdly, when this conflict is over, and every conflict is over sometime, the conflict between the IRA and the British took 300 years but ended. I have no doubt that the Sri Lankan ethnic conflict will end, but it might end with Sri Lanka reduced to a shell, as was East Timor, and we in Australia watched as East Timor was reduced to a shell before we intervened. Whether Sri Lanka admits it or not, Sri Lanka has been at war with the Tamil people, and we cannot fight a war without weapons. But before I show you the weapons, I would like to make 2 points. Weapons that you are going to see are not in some army store. They are in active use and being unleashed on Tamil civilians in the north and the east by the armed forces with impunity. There is no accountability. Those who use them are decorated by the government. We had one sent to Australia as an ambassador, who had a lot of explaining to do on the conduct of that war in the north, with some 900 people, civilians, taken into his custody, their bodies being found in mass graves. So they are decorated. And when I objected to this person being sent here, I was told that he was a highly decorated officer, decorated in making people disappear. The army are blessed by the Buddhist monks. They are regarded as heroes, saving the nation. You might ask, saving what nation? The Sri Lankan nation. From whom? From the Tamils. But the Tamils are also members of that nation. So the nation is being saved from the Tamils who are part of that nation. The whole thing is completely absurd. The second point I want to make is that this war that is being conducted is against the Tamil people. It's not just against the Tamil Tigers. It is against the Tamil people to force them to accept Sri Lanka as a singular Buddhist nation. Let us now see some of the weapons that are being used and what is being used. Here are the weapons that are being unleashed. They are anti-personnel high explosive rounds. Each round has 900 steel bores and 2,000 to 3,000 incendiary pellets which scatter over a lethal 15-meter radius. There are bouncing anti-personnel rounds which impact on the ground and bounce off the ground to chest high or 2 meters and then burst, a lethal over 18-meter radius. These actually have been banned in most countries, but Sri Lanka continues to use them. Here are battle tanks, just one of many, some even larger than this. This is being unleashed on civilians, mind you. Here are multi-barrel rocket launchers firing some 35 rockets a minute, some even more. Here they are. The recipients may be Tamil militants or Tamil civilians. It is all fair game as long as it is Tamil. Here they are in action. Where do these shells land? You will see where they land in a minute. Here are the warships which Tamil and Muslim fishermen have to cope with on a daily basis. Fast attack gunboats. Sri Lanka is a country without external enemies, but not necessarily to have ships of this size to fight its own people, the Tamils. Here are the offshore patrol vessels which shoot first and question later, the massive landing craft. Here are the potential victims and the actual victims. Tamil and Muslim fishermen, this fishing net. The actual victims, a man with his legs blown off, his distraught wife wonders how they're going to manage. You know the lethal jets and bombers, the terrible K-4 jet, which has bombed orphanages, refugee camps and much more. You see all this. This is the K-4 jet made in Israel, jet engines made in the US, General Electric, target Sri Lankan Tamil civilian population. Here they are lining up to go on a killing spree. Pilot of one of the